Buonasera. Let's get this going. Welcome again, everybody. This is the second session of our workshop on creative writing. Today, this is the practical session of our workshop. But before this, we will start with a little bit of an introduction of the text with which we are going to work. And the introduction will be by Professor Simonetti, who probably you know. He's professor of American literature here in Sapienza. Well, I said here, but actually I'm in my room, so not really here. And I will leave the floor to him so that we can enjoy the introduction to Bartleby the Scrivener.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, thank you. Now, thank you for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here. And let's go straight to what we are going to talk about tonight. That is Bartleby the Scrivener. I know you've read it, so there's no spoiler alert. I'm sure that you have enjoyed the book, the short story, actually. But in the meantime, let me just say something about the origins of the story. Bartleby, Melville wrote Bartleby probably during the summer of 1853, and then it was published in 2 installments in Putnam's Monthly. That was a journal in the issues of November and December 1853. So this is the first publication of the story. Then it was included in the only collection of stories that was published by Melville during his life, that is called the Piazza Tales, and it came out in 1856. And Bartleby is the first story. So just after the introductory sketch that Melville wrote, especially for this collection of essays, of stories that is called the Piazza. So just after the introductory sketch, there is Bartleby the Scrivener as a story. So Melville chose to put it at the very beginning of his book. In that period, so we are in 1853, so when Melville was writing and then publishing Bartleby, he had lost somehow credit in the publishing world. So his career was, going downstairs, and there were, gossip that Melville had lost his talent. So the publishers didn't want to publish anything by him unless it was completely, good and great, because they believed that he had somehow taken a very dangerous road. He had published Moby Dick just 1.5 years before that. So it's very near, because Melville, today we consider Melville one of the most important and one of the greatest writers in American literature, in American history, especially in the 19th century. But during his life, his literary fame was mainly linked to his first novels, Taipi, Omu, the novels in which he reinvented somehow the adventures that he lived by during his travels and journeys in the South Seas, so when he was young. well, not actually that young. The Taipei, his first novel was published in 1846, and his last novel, The Confidence Man, it was published in 1857. So roughly 10 years. Melville's career as a novelist lasted 10 years. 10, 11 years. Then he went to, Jerusalem, to the Mediterranean, to the Holy Land. And from then on, he wrote only poetry until his death in 1891. So he wrote 10 years, novels, and roughly 35 years, he was a poet. Apart from Billy Budd, there is, a novel, or let's say a novella that remained unfinished because he wrote it in the last years of his life. So in the last years of his life, he came back to the novel, to the narrative in general. But on the other hand, he is considered mainly as a novelist today, even though he was much more a poet than a novelist. And I don't know how many of you knew this detail. So in this, after Moby Dick, that had mixed review. Today we would say that he had mixed reviews. He wrote immediately another novel that is called Pierre, and that novel completely destroyed his reputation. Moby Dick was published in 1851. Pierre was published in 1852, so just 1 year after Moby Dick. But Pierre was, today we would say, a flop. There were very bad reviews. There were jokes on Melville's, craziness. There was a title of a review that said Herman Melville crazy. Even his family, his parents, his mother actually, and his relatives believed that he, was under too much stress for writing too many novels. And then he was in a personal crisis, let's say. And it is in this very period that he began writing short stories to be published in the journals. Because the short story in the journals were published anonymously, even though, everybody knew who was the author, but there is no Herman Melville name on the short stories published in the journals. And moreover, they gave him a sort of a immediate earnings. So they paid him immediately after he had finished the short story. So he needed money, of course. So Bartleby the Scrivener is positioned between the mega novels, the world novels, Moby Dick, Pierre, and the poetry. So it's a middle phase, let's say, when the short story, with the short story, Melville tries to somehow refine his writing to be much more strict, much more concise. So Bartleby, it's subtitled A Story of Wall Street. And it is important to notice that this subtitle, A Story of Wall Street, appears only in the journal version. In the Piazza collection, it is called only Bartleby the Scrivener. So Melville changed the title, or well, he neglected to add the subtitle to the second version, the new edition of the story when it was published in the collection in book form. What does it mean that it's called A Story of Wall Street? Wall Street, of course, is the center of the financial world of the business of New York. Even at that time, it was a symbol of, well, today we would say capitalism, but it is, the financial tower of that kind of life, the business life of New York. But Wall Street is also a symbol, and the wall is a very important symbol in the story. The wall just outside Bartleby's window, but also a metaphorical wall, a wall that somehow has a double function. It protects, and it keeps one inside, so entrapped somehow. So it's a prison, but it's also protection. Let's think of the screen, the green screen that is that the lawyer, the narrator, puts between himself and Bartleby. So it's a sort of a wall. And let's think of the claustrophobic space of the office. This is another, meaning of the wall. And it's also a symbol of Bartleby's inscrutability. So the difficulties for us readers and also for the narrator to understand Bartleby, what Bartleby, means, what he's thinking about, what he wants, what he feels. So Bartleby is himself a wall somehow, a wall against which the narrator and the reader clashes continuously in the course of the story. We are not able to enter that wall. And then at the end, as you know, Bartleby will be imprisoned. So he will end up in the Tombs. That is this big prison that was in New York, that now it's no longer there. But it's a very big building that has the form and the structure of an Egyptian building. So it's called the Tombs because of its, its magnificence and its form that resembles an old Egyptian structure. What's the meaning of Bartleby? What's the purpose of Bartleby? What does Bartleby want? This is the core of this is the enigma of the story. And we don't know it because we have only the point of view of the narrator, of the lawyer, who talks in the first person. He says, I am a rather elderly man. So he describes himself as a man of the world, as someone who has experience, rather elderly, who has seen many things. He describes himself as a safe man, so one who doesn't look trouble. He doesn't want to create a fuss or to be, at the center of the situation. He believes he is objective. He believes he is reasonable. He has sense. So he will try to explain Bartleby. He said that Bartleby is an interesting and somewhat singular man. He says, my job has given me the opportunity of meeting an interesting and somewhat singular set of men, of whom as yet nothing that I know of has ever been written. I mean the law copists or scriveners. So he puts Bartleby into a general category, that of the scriveners. But he says that Bartleby, one of them, was a scrivener, the strangest I ever saw or heard of. So this is while of other, I'm quoting now, while of other low copyists, I might write the complete life of Bartleby, nothing of that sort can be done. And this is an irreparable loss to literature. So he wants to create a story, a piece of literature to explain Bartleby, but it's not possible. It's not possible. So that's the way, the reason why this short story is so enthralling, is so fascinating for us today. Because Bartleby is an enigma, is a mystery. And we can, interpret his character in many ways. For instance, one of the things that we can say as related to tonight's meeting is related to writing. Bartleby is a scrivener, and a scrivener is not a writer. A scrivener is, a copy machine, is someone who doesn't have to be original. He has to copy, he must copy. So he is also a symbol of a particular type of writer in the 19th century United States. A writer that is not original, a writer that writes only for money, completely different from Melville, who decided to write what he wanted or what he felt inspired to write, even though he didn't sell, even though, his fame, his literary fame was crushed. So there is this opposition. Bartleby is a ghost writer. We could describe him as a ghost writer, someone who writes for other persons. He doesn't write what he wants to write. And he is characterized as a ghost. Think of when he appears in the threshold, in the middle of the door. And he repeats a formula, I would prefer not to. And that formula means quite nothing. It means that he doesn't want to choose. I would prefer not to. It doesn't mean that he doesn't want to do that or that he won't do that. No, it means that he doesn't prefer to do that, but what does it mean to prefer something? Can you decide to prefer or not prefer something? If I ask you, do you prefer, going to the beach or going to the mountains? You say, no, I prefer going to the beach. But I say, no, you should prefer the other thing. It's impossible. It's something innate. It's something that you feel that you can't change. I would prefer not to. It means that that kind of job, that kind of life, that kind of, job, in a sense, is contrary to what a human being could prefer, could like, could want to do. And this is difficult to understand, but it's very important because he is the opposition, the other side of the self-made man that is at the center of American culture. He is the self-made man. He undoes himself. He doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't want to write. Then he doesn't want to leave the office. He doesn't want to speak. He subtracts always something until he remains completely empty or completely opaque. You can't understand him. You can enter into contact with him. And finally, to conclude, we have the narrator who tries every possible way of communicating with Bartleby. At the beginning, he tries to reason with him. Then he tries to interprets. He's denied to do something as, with logical explanation. So maybe he is blind, maybe he cannot see, maybe he is ill, etc., etc. Then he decides to ignore him. Okay, Bartleby, stay there behind your screen. I do as if are not here. Then he tries to give him money. You know, I give you money and you go away, and he doesn't go. He doesn't take money. Then he moves himself, hoping that, you know, Bartleby will remain there. And finally, Bartleby, another, you know, even though it's not the center of our discourse today, but Bartleby becomes a sort of a Christ-like figure when the lawyer denies to having known him. Do you know him? No, I don't know him. It's not related to me. Just like St. Peter for 3 times, he says, I don't know this man. It's not my responsibility. Do with him as you like. It's not, you know, my responsibility. So he has to betray him somehow in order to get rid of him. And finally, there's that final passage at the end when the lawyer, after the end of the story, tries to give himself and the reader an explanation for Bartleby's behavior. And he says, I have heard a rumor, a gossip that maybe he worked in the dead letters office. So it was that kind of job, that kind of alienation, that kind of repetitious job that, you know, contributed to his derangement. But in my opinion, at least, this is only a sort of a discharge of responsibility, as if to say, when Bartleby came here, he was already broken. It's not my fault. You know, I did whatever it was possible to do in order to, you know, help him or try to understand him, but maybe it's impossible. And the very final sentence that says, "Ah, Bartleby, ah, humanity." It's a complete, you know, revolution from the very beginning when he said he was singular, he was unique. I've known many scriveners, but he was, you know, unique. I haven't seen someone like him. And then in the end, he says, Bartleby, humanity. So he associates him to all humanity, to the human condition. It's a complete reverse of, you know, the logic. And we can interpret that our Bartleby, our humanities in many ways. And it depends on how we interpret that final sentence that we can assign a meaning or an interpretation to Bartleby, because, you know, you can consider his character in many, many, many different ways. And we have only the point of view of the lawyer. So it would be very interesting, in my opinion, to tell the story from, for instance, the point of view of Bartleby, you know, or from the point of view of the other employees, or from, for instance, I don't know, an extra diegetic narrator. So someone who is just outside the story and comments on what happens. And I believe that the story would be quite different. Okay, I'm finished.
Thank you very much, Professor. That was certainly not only interesting, but also useful, I believe, for the work that we are going to do next, which is kind of what you proposed, in meaning that we are going to rearrange something in that story. Obviously, it's not going to be the point of view, so we're not messing that much with the narrator, which, as I believe, would also be some sort of critical exercise, because obviously describing something from Bartleby's point of view is also describing Bartleby itself, its being, its essence, its very essence. And thus that would be both creative but also a critical exercise. But right now, I would like to leave the floor instead to Marta, who's going to actually describe the exercise that we're going to do. And before this, again, I don't know, Professor Simonetti, if you have something to do, since we are now going to start with our exercises, be free to leave the call. We will not hold any grudge. Actually, we thank you so much for your introduction, for your presence here today. It has been great. I can't, this is my Trump way to great.
I'll be around for a time, okay, so don't worry, but thank you very much. And in case you won't see me anymore, it means that I had to go, okay?
Perfect. Before starting with the description of the exercise, I'm going to say something, which is that we have created a number of breakout rooms in which you will be divided. And you will have a coordinator. Each room has a coordinator. 4 groups. I have created 4 groups. The coordinator will be, one is Marta, then we have Eleonora Civitarese, Michela Dinolfi, and Marco Marchesini. They will be the coordinators of each group. I will, in a moment, divide you in said rooms. You probably will end having a notification, like an invitation to get into the group. Don't go in there, not right now. Wait for Marta to explain the exercise first. Then you will meet with the coordinator in the room, and you will start the exercises. So as I start dividing you in groups, Marta, please, the floor is yours whenever you want.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Professor Simonetti, for the very interesting and insightful presentation on Bartleby, which actually touched on to a lot of points and elements that I think we should keep in consideration today as well during the exercise. But yes, so basically on Monday, as you know, we had our first workshop where we discussed the theoretical concepts, the theoretical elements of creative writing, at least some of. We talked a bit about what creative writing is and how it is taught in the United Kingdom. And we discussed, as you remember, some of the elements of fiction, so character, setting, point of view, and plotting. But we also said that creative writing is the product of the relationship between a critical discourse and a creative discourse. So it's essential at this point to actually have a creative discourse and actual practice in order to develop the competencies that you will need. So generally, creative writing courses are not based on a text. They're just based on a writing prompt, and then students will have to come up with an original idea. But we thought it would be nice to choose Bartleby, first of all, because it's a nice connection with your course, because I know that you've studied Melville, so it's actually a useful thing as well for your studies. And also because for all the 2 reasons. The first one is that Bartleby, it's a very atypical short story, because it doesn't treat the fictional element that we discussed on Monday in the traditional way. So the narratological elements are a bit different from the canonical understanding of them. And secondly, because as Professor Simonetti actually anticipated, sorry, anticipated, Bartleby, we don't know anything about Bartleby, and the story is not told by his perspective. So it would actually be quite interesting to have him telling us a story and to imagine who Bartleby is, or who he might be as well. So in terms of the elements of fiction, just wanted to briefly mention how the differences between what we discussed on Monday, just to contextualize the story. First of all, the character, as we said, is someone who we don't really know, who we don't really understand, and it just comes from nowhere, basically. So there are no all the characterization elements that we discussed on Monday, but it's still a very strong character, and the story works so well because of the lack of these characterization elements. Everything we know is told by the narrator, so the narrator and the point of view of the narrator is actually a key element of this story, and it's the center of a lot of text analysis as well, because we have to understand the lawyer in order to understand our character. And the only things really that we know about the character is that he refuses to conform to the norms and to do what it's told to do. It refuses to choose. And we can also guess that this refusal is a sort of symptom of an alienation resulting from the dehumanizing condition of Wall Street. And Wall Street, again, it's the setting of our story, and it's another key element. The setting is another key element of this narrative, because it's literally, as Professor Simonetti was saying, is a walled street. So you have this wall, this way, this structure of the setting that also gives meaning to the character. So the character is described in a way, we get information about the character in a way also from the setting. And then finally, the plot as well is not exactly what we discussed on Monday, because we talked about plot being driven by the character's action. And now we are looking at a plot which is instead driven by the choice of the character, well, the lack of choice, the refusal to take action, the refusal to choose. So, but we still have a close relationship between character and plot. We still have the close relationship that we discussed on Monday, but in a weird, subverted way at the same time. So I think this story definitely offers an opportunity to reflect on how it is extremely important to learn and study all the narratological elements and understand how they work and learn how to practice. But at the same time, to know that you can break the rules once you've mastered them, and you can still create an extremely beautiful piece of literature like Bartleby the Scrivener. So it's a good example, I think, to observe how the elements of fiction can be changed depending on the needs of the writer as well. And as I was saying, the second reason I chosen Bartleby for this workshop is because we don't know anything about him, or we know very little. So I thought it would be a very fun exercise to work on characterization and to actually create your own Bartleby. There is an essay called Bartleby the Ascetic Advent from H. Bruce Franklin, and he wrote, to read Bartleby well, we must first realize that we can never know who or what Bartleby is, but that we are continuously asked to guess who or what he might be. So what I want you to do today is basically to guess who Bartleby is. And this is not just in a sense of actually trying to interpret and understand Melville's Bartleby. So we're not necessarily working critically with a critical analysis of the text today, because we're focusing on the creative side. So I kind of wanted to step away from the text for a moment and just trying to imagine who Bartleby could be. And to do this, we're going to have a first exercise with a character sheet that we discussed on Monday as one of the writing tools, which is really useful for character development. So each group will basically work on a character sheet and will come up with an alternative Bartleby. Again, you're not necessarily writing an interpretation of Melville's Bartleby, although you can if you want, but you can come up with a completely different character. It could be a woman, it could be a child, it could be working in a zoo, it could be an astronaut, it could be anything you want. The only one element that I'm asking you to keep constant and to keep from the original text is this refusal to take action and this refusal to choose. So that I would prefer not to. I would like you to keep this capsule concept basically as constant element in your character. And you're obviously free to slightly change that as well if you like. So that I would prefer not to could change into I don't want to, and it could change into I cannot, which obviously have completely different meaning and will naturally also create a completely different narrative. But I just like the idea of having a character who will not do something for certain reasons and has this sort of a catchphrase. They could be, I would prefer not to, or you could also change. And once you work on your character, also think about the setting where your character would be. It could be, again, you could stay as close as you want to the text. So you could choose a city, you could choose an office, but you can also really set it somewhere else as well, like a fantasy world, or wherever you like, or a supermarket, wherever you like. There is total freedom to creativity. Total freedom to be creative, sorry. And then after this exercise, we're gonna get back together, discuss all the different characters and all the different themes that we encountered changing the characters as well. And then we're gonna do the second exercise. And in the second exercise, each group will have an extract And then you will have to rewrite this extract using the first person narrative, but from the perspective of your Bartleby. So it will be your Bartleby to tell the story. And because your Bartleby is telling the story, the motives behind is, I would prefer not to, will be clear to the reader, and will be able to kind of understand the thought process behind their refusal. When I say rewrite the paragraph, rewrite the extract, I'm not expecting you to like follow line by line the actual extract or create a great piece of writing. It's literally just a fun exercise. You could write a very short paragraph, you know, where you just try to envision a scene with with your character in it. And the extract I'm going to provide are just some interactions between Bartleby and the lawyer. So just some brief conversation that he has with the lawyer throughout the narrative. Yes, and I hope that from this exercise and experiment, you're gonna get two things. The first one is that Bartleby is just perfect as it is, to be honest. You're gonna realize that if you do add characterization to Bartleby, you will have a completely different narrative, which will not be as, oh, thank you, Professor Simonetti. Sorry, just read the text. Just leaving us now. But yes, so you're gonna have a completely different narrative, and you're gonna have a completely different results, a completely different themes. And then on the other end as well, you, I hope that from this exercise, you gain also an understanding of how characterization works and how character development works as well. So I hope this makes sense, but there will be one of us in each group. So if you have any question, just ask us and we'll be there working with you. Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm not wrong, you should have received the invitation for your rooms. Something that I will ask is, please, as we work all together, if you can activate your cameras, take part as actively as you can to the exercises. And just a little point that I will make is that the recording of what we are going to do from now on will be stopped. Not for anything, but just to be sure that creativity is not impeded in any way, hindered by the knowledge that someone else will read, actually see and hear what we say today. So this is something that we'll do exactly now. Bam.